The Tigris and Euphrates rivers run through Mesopotamia, which is one piece of land. It was where writing, astrology, math, farming, crafts, and trade all began. The Sumerians built the first great cities and invented the wheel, the plow, and the brick in this area. However, Mesopotamia also played host to the first wars and the formation of the first large armies. How did this old, advanced civilization die out and fail? Let's go back to the beginning. The story of the Sumerian people is a fascinating one. The beginning of civilization in ancient Mesopotamia was one of the most important times in human history. This important time, which some people call the birth of civilization, marks the start of a new stage in human evolution. During this time, people went from living in small groups of hunter-gatherers to living in settled communities with complex social structures and rich cultural traditions. Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, was where civilization began. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers watered the fertile plains that gave rise to human progress. The Sumerians, the first known civilization in history, came to be because of the roots of civilization that grew in this rich landscape. The Sumerians were the first people to live in southern Mesopotamia, around 4000 B.C.E. They built the first cities and started civilization. These ancient Sumerian settlements had to turn to farming to stay alive. They used the rich soil that the river left behind after its yearly floods to grow crops like barley, wheat, and dates. Agriculture made more food than people needed, which allowed for the growth of population centers and the specialization of labor. This led to complex social and economic systems. One of the most important things that the Sumerians did was invent writing, which changed how people kept records and talked to each other. In the year 3500 BCE, the Sumerians made cuneiform, which is the first known writing system in the world. It was made up of wedge-shaped letters pressed into clay tablets. This amazing invention made it possible to write down laws, administrative documents, and literary works. This laid the groundwork for preserving information and passing it on to future generations. As Sumerian society grew, it became more urbanized, with city-states that were centers of trade, culture, and learning. Cities like Uruk, Ur, and Eridu had amazing buildings, like ziggurats, temples, and palaces. These buildings were signs of Sumerian power and uniqueness. In these city-states, complicated social hierarchies formed, with kings and priests having a lot of power and influence. The rise of civilization in ancient Mesopotamia marked a pivotal moment in human history, as individuals transitioned from nomadic to sedentary lifestyles. The building of cities, the invention of writing, and the building of complex social and economic systems all helped to create the basis for the rise of complex civilizations that would shape human history for thousands of years. The rise of civilization in ancient Mesopotamia was a turning point in human history that led to a time of progress and new ideas. People say that the Sumerians were the first civilization in history. Their contributions to writing, city building, and social structure laid the groundwork for other civilizations and the development of modern human society. As we delve further into the story of the Sumerians and their remarkable achievements, we gain significant insights regarding the origins of civilization and the enduring influence of ancient Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia, which means land between the rivers, is crucial to the history of human civilization because of its geography. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers meet in this part of the Middle East, making it one of the most fertile areas on Earth. This geographical feature was crucial in shaping the development of civilization in ancient times, as it created the perfect conditions for the first civilizations to arise. The annual flooding of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers makes Mesopotamia's vast plains very fertile. This is its most interesting geographical feature. These rivers start in the mountains of what is now Turkey and flow downstream, leaving behind nutrient-rich silt that covers the floodplains and builds up a layer of rich soil that is ideal for farming. Frequent floods in the river bring nutrients back to the soil, which means that crops can grow all year long and there can be multiple harvests. The fertile plains of Mesopotamia made it easy for early human settlers to acquire food and build permanent homes. The rich soil allowed for a wide range of crops to be grown, including dates, vegetables, barley, and wheat, which were the main foods that people in Mesopotamia ate. Agriculture produced more food than required, resulting in an increase in the number of people residing in permanent communities. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers were important transportation routes that helped trade and communication between different areas. They also provided water for farming. The early people who lived in Mesopotamia built complex irrigation systems to move water from rivers to their farms. To make the most out of farming and control the flow of water, people built reservoirs, dikes, and canals. The Mesopotamians used these ways of managing water to build rich cities and grow food all year round, even in the desert. Mesopotamia was a major trade hub in ancient times due to its location, but it also had great farming potential. Because it was located at the crossroads of Asia, Africa, and Europe, Mesopotamia served as a gateway between the East and the West, encouraging the exchange of trade, ideas, and cultures. Mesopotamia was an even more important place for trade because it had valuable resources like gold, precious stones, and wood. There were many favorable things about Mesopotamia, but there were also some adverse things. The surrounding deserts protected the area from external threats. These deserts also had issues due to the harsh environment and lack of water, so creative water management was needed. Because Mesopotamia was close to places like Egypt, Anatolia, and the Levant, it was easy for different civilizations to meet and share their cultures. Because it had so many different languages, cultures, and ways of life, Mesopotamia was a place where ideas and new things could spread. This exchange of ideas between cultures helped shape Mesopotamian civilization and gave the country its own unique cultural identity. There is no way to overstate how important Mesopotamia's geography is. In ancient times, civilization could grow there because of its strategic location, natural defenses, and fertile plains. The first civilizations in the world came about because there were many agricultural resources, water for irrigation, and opportunities for trade and cultural exchange. The fact that Mesopotamia was the birthplace of civilization shows how important geography has always been in shaping the course of human history. The Sumerians were the first people in history to build a civilization. They came from southern Mesopotamia around 4000 B.C.E. The Sumerians, the first civilization to be found, had a major impact on the course of human history by laying the groundwork for many inventions and improvements that would define later societies. divergent perspectives among scholars regarding the linguistic, cultural, and racial affiliations of the Sumerians result in a lack of clarity regarding their origins. Some theories suggest that the Sumerians were already residing in Mesopotamia, while others assert that they relocated there and introduced civilization. No matter where they came from, the Sumerians are known for building the first cities and coming up with the non-uniform writing system. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers left behind rich soil that was ideal for farming. And this is where the Sumerians lived, in the green plains of southern Mesopotamia. They began to build villages and towns. As their populations grew, these settlements and villages eventually became cities with a lot of people, huge buildings, and very advanced social structures. Cities like Uruk, Ur, and Eridu grew into important places for trade, culture, and learning, bringing in traders, merchants, and scholars from all over the area. The Sumerians made many important contributions to human civilization by laying the groundwork for many inventions and advances that would change its course. The most important thing they did that will last is invent writing, which changed how people kept records and talked to each other. The Sumerians made the first writing system in the world in 3500 B.C.E. It was not uniform. The uniform. They did this by using wedge-shaped symbols to press into clay tablets. This wonderful achievement made it possible to write down laws, books, and official papers, which protected Sumerian knowledge and culture for future generations. The Sumerians made big strides in math, astronomy, building, and writing. They made a complex number system based on the sexagesimal system. This system was the basis for later mathematical ideas like fractions and algebra. By algebra, by looking at the sky, they were able to observe astronomical events like eclipses and the movements of planets, and they made a lunar calendar. People knew the Sumerians for their enormous buildings, like city walls, temples, and ziggurats. These beautiful buildings showed how powerful and important Sumerian kings were, and how they were supposed to keep the divine order. They had both practical and symbolic uses. The massive ziggurat of Ur, which is dedicated to the moon goddess Nana, is one of the best examples of how beautiful and complex Sumerian architecture was. Sumerian culture was defined by a complicated social system that put kings and priests at the top of the social order. City-states were the most important political groups at the time. Each one was led by a king who had divine power. These city-states often made alliances and fought for control of land, resources, and trade routes, even time. Even though they didn't always agree on politics, the Sumerians had a shared cultural and religious legacy. They worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses and did rituals and ceremonies to win the gods' favor. Even though Sumerian culture fell apart, we can still see its effects today. The roots. Event today. The Sumerians made many discoveries and breakthroughs that helped later civilizations. These discoveries changed everything from art and architecture to law and government. Written law, city planning, and organized religion are some Sumerian ideas that have had a lasting impact on modern society. These ideas show how important this ancient civilization was. The rise of civilization in ancient Mesopotamia marked the start of a time of creativity and artistic achievement that had never been seen before. Astrology today. The four. Astrology and the evolution of writing are two of the most important discoveries that happened during this time. They set the stage for future human growth. This section will explore the fascinating origins of these inventions and their impact on human history. The invention of writing in ancient Mesopotamia was one of the most important things that happened. It marked the start of written history and set up a way for people to pass on information and culture from one generation to the next. The before. Astrology Sumerians made cuneiform around 3500 B.C.E. They used a reed stylus to press wedge-shaped characters into clay tablets to make cuneiform. This cuneiform. This was a way for the growing Mesopotamian city-states to talk to each other and keep records. The cuneiform was first used for practical documents like legal, business, and government records. Eventually, it became a complicated writing system that could express a wide range of ideas, from poetry and literature to religious and scientific texts. The invention of writing changed the way people talked to each other and made it possible to store and share knowledge on a scale that had never been seen before. Astrology and studying heavenly events and how they affect human affairs were essential parts of ancient Mesopotamian religion and culture. The culture, the idea that human fate and the universe are connected, is shown in the oldest known astrological books, which are from the 2nd millennium B.C.E. in Mesopotamia. Mesopotamian astrologers closely monitored the movements of the planets, stars, and constellations, believing that these celestial bodies significantly influenced people's lives and societies. They made complicated ways to tell the future by using astronomical signs like comets, planetary conjunctions, and eclipses. Astrology had a big impact on Mesopotamian religion and helped people make choices about everything from their problems to politics. The Sumerians made significant contributions to math and developed numerous ideas that are still in use today. They made a complicated number system based on the sexagesimal system by using base 60 notation. This method laid the groundwork for future mathematical progress and made it easier to do math that involved fractions, multiplication, and division. The division. The Sumerians came up with a way to count and made big strides in geometry and trigonometry. They also came up with ways to build buildings, measure land, and look at stars. These new ideas in math were very important for improving astronomy and astrology, and for building enormous temples and ziggurats. The Sumerians were also ahead of their time when it came to technology, coming up with many new ideas that changed how people lived. The wheel, the plow, and the sail were three of their most important inventions. They changed trade, transportation, and farming in ancient Mesopotamia. The invention of the wheel in 3500 BCE made it possible to make wheeled vehicles like carts and chariots, which made it easier to move people and goods over long distances. Around the same time, the plow was invented, which made it easier to grow crops. This made farming more productive and helped cities grow. The sail came later and changed marine exploration and trade, opening up new business and cross-cultural opportunities. Mesopotamia is home to some of the most amazing buildings from ancient times, such as ziggurats, temples, and palaces. The Sumerians were outstanding builders who used the most advanced building methods to make beautiful buildings that perfectly showed how grand and complicated their culture was. Huge stepping pyramids and ziggurats, built for the gods, were the most renowned structures in ancient Mesopotamia. They were centers for both government and religion. The enormous ziggurat of Ur is the most famous example. It stood as a sign of how powerful and wealthy the ancient city of Ur was. The invention of writing, astrology, and other new ideas in ancient Mesopotamia marked a turning point in the history of humanity. It set the stage for the rise of civilization and the creation of modern human society. Writing changed the way people kept records and talked to each other, while astrology gave people ideas about how the universe works and how it affects people's lives. Thanks to new ideas in math, technology, and architecture, Mesopotamian culture got better. These advancements continued to shape the future. We appreciate the creativity, resourcefulness, and strength of our predecessors, as well as the lasting impact of their inventions on human history. As we discover more about the past of ancient Mesopotamia, the rise of city-states and the process of urbanization in ancient Mesopotamia was a significant moment in human history. As more people moved to Mesopotamia and more towns and cities grew, it became a patchwork of lively urban centers, each with its personality, culture, and government. This chapter will discuss city-states and urbanization in ancient Mesopotamia, as well as how these lively societies changed over time and how they helped civilization move forward. City-states and urbanization significantly influenced the rise of human civilization in ancient Mesopotamia. As cities grew and societies became more complex, Mesopotamia's geography changed. This led to the rise of independent city-states and the growth of thriving urban centers. As we keep learning about the story of city-states and urbanization, we learn important things about how ancient Mesopotamian civilization worked and how its cities have had a lasting effect. The Sumerian city-states of Uruk and Ur are still reminders of how advanced and lively Mesopotamian culture was before history began. These old Mesopotamian cities became important political, economic, and cultural centers that changed the course of human history and had a lasting effect on the area. In this section, we will look into the fascinating story of how these Sumerian city-states grew from small beginnings to major power centers. Uruk is an important place in the history of ancient Mesopotamia. It is often called one of the first real towns in history. Uruk was a major city during the Uruk period. It was located in southern Mesopotamia, near the modern-day city of Wara in Iraq. c. 43,100 B.C.E. The city grew quickly and became rich because it was located on the banks of the Euphrates River and close to a rich farming area. Uruk was a small village at first, with a sacred area honoring the city's patron goddess Inanna at its center. Over time, the settlement grew wider and longer until it covered more than 2.5 kilometers and had tens of thousands of people living there. Uruk was protected by a massive wall made of mud bricks that was over 9 kilometers long and had defensive towers on it. This wall served as both a barrier against outside threats and a reminder that Uruk was a fortified city. The White Temple and the Ana Ziggurat were two of the largest buildings in Uruk, which was famous for its unique city planning and architecture. The Iana Ziggurat was a monument to the goddess Inanna that stood for the strength and wealth of the city. It was the center of religious life in Uruk. The White Temple, which was at the top of the ziggurat, was a sacred place where religious rites and ceremonies were held and sacrifices were made to the gods. Uruk was one of the largest cities in ancient Mesopotamia, and it was very important for trade and business. People from all over the area come to the city to buy, sell, and trade goods. It is a busy place for business. Trade routes connecting Mesopotamia to other areas were easily accessible due to Uruk's location on the Euphrates River. This made it easy for people to share goods, ideas, and cultural practices. In the early dynastic period, around 292,334 B.C.E., the Sumerian city-state of Ur thrived near what is now Nasiriyah in Iraq. Uruk was rich because it was on the Euphrates River and was close to rich farming areas. Around 2900 B.C.E., the city of Ur became an important urban center and the capital of the Sumerian city-state. This was the start of Er's rise to fame. King Mesopotamia was responsible for making Ur's kingdom bigger and stronger. He did this by making friends with and trading with nearby city-states. People started calling the city the glittering jewel of the South because of its wealth, culture, and artistic achievements. The massive ziggurat of Ur is one of the most famous buildings from ancient Mesopotamia. It is one of the city's many wonderful architectural achievements. The ziggurat, a huge stepped pyramid, was built to honor the moon goddess Nana and was the center of the city's religious life. The ziggurat was surrounded by a thick wall made of mud bricks that protected the town from attacks from the outside. Ur's outside. Ur's success was due in large part to its role as a center for trade and commerce. Because it was on trade routes that connected Mesopotamia to the Indian Ocean, Persian Gulf, and other places, the city was able to trade goods like metals, textiles, luxury items, and grain. Traders traveled far and wide, doing business with places as far away as the Arabian Peninsula and the Indus Valley civilization, which is now in Pakistan. Ur was not only a center for trade, but it was also a place where art thrived and new ideas were born. The city made many things, such as uniform tablets and jewelry. Potters, jewelers, and scribes were just a few of them. Theathum, the famous standard of a wooden box covered in intricate mosaics showing scenes of war and peace, was found in a royal cemetery. Even cemetery. Even though they were rich and powerful, the royal tombs of your decline were caused by many things, including unstable politics, environmental damage, and outside invasion. People stopped living in the city around 200 B.C.E., and it wasn't relevant again until archaeologists found it in the 1800s. The 1800s. The old ruins that dot the southern Mesopotamian countryside are a constant reminder of how big and important the city used to be in the history of human civilization. The civilization. The rise of Sumerian city-states like Uruk and Ur is a significant event in the history of ancient Mesopotamia. These ancient Mesopotamian cities grew to be important political, economic, and cultural centers that changed the course of history and had a lasting effect on the region. As we learn more about the history of these Sumerian city-states, we find out important things about how ancient Mesopotamian society worked and how its cities still affect us today. In ancient Mesopotamia, city-states and the growth of cities brought about a lot of new ideas on how to build things and how to live in cities. As more people moved to cities and towns, they became places where politics, business, and culture happened. The people who lived in ancient Mesopotamia were intelligent and creative. Their genius is clear from the beautiful buildings they built. This part will tell you about the towns and cities of Mesopotamia. including their buildings and how people lived their lives every day. This will give you an idea of how active and busy the people who lived there were. People in the Mesopotamian city-states knew a lot about the big buildings there, such as ziggurats, temples, palaces, and city walls. These amazing buildings showed how rich, powerful, and religious the people in charge were. They were helpful in both practical and symbolic ways. The ziggurat, a huge pyramid with steps that lead to the gods, is one of the most famous buildings in Mesopotamian city-states. People thought that ziggurats were the homes of the gods on earth and used them for religious purposes. They were made of mud bricks and often had stairs, terraces, and temples for different gods. The ziggurat at Ur is the most well-known. It is in the city of Ur and stands over 64 feet tall. Many people in Mesopotamia went to temples for religious reasons. People often put them inside or on top of ziggurats. In these temples, priests prayed to the gods for help and gave them gifts. People prayed, did rituals, and gave things up there. Most temples were made of mud bricks and had beautiful carvings, glazed tiles, and bright murals that showed religious ceremonies and myths. Palaces were the homes of kings and rulers in Mesopotamian city-states, and they were also the centers of political power. These enormous buildings were built on a grand scale and had beautiful architectural details like courtyards, audience halls, and offices for the people who ran the place. The wealthy and powerful ruling class used relief carvings, frescoes, and glazed brickwork in their palaces to show off their wealth and power. These city-states of Mesopotamia needed walls to keep their cities safe. They were made of bricks that had been baked, or mud. The walls protected the city from outside threats, including wars, raids, and invasions. People often added gates, towers, and battlements on the walls to keep invaders out and make the city's defenses stronger. People in the city-states of Mesopotamia spent a lot of time with other people, walking around busy streets and buying in busy markets. People from the area, as well as visitors, traders, and craftsmen, all went there to buy, sell, and trade. Goods. In these regions, people spoke different languages, had different customs, and lived in different ways. The people worked in trade, business, and crafts. Most important parts of city life. Markets were often held in the city squares. People sold a lot of different things, like food, clothes, pottery, and expensive things. People who made things like textiles, metalwork, and pottery worked in special shops. People shops. People in the country and other countries bought these things. Mesopotamian city-states assigned social roles and places of residence to their citizens based on their wealth, occupation, and family history. The ruling class, which included kings, priests, and nobles, was at the top of the social structure. They were wealthy, influential, and possessed substantial financial resources. They were better than free people, who were important to the city-state's economy and government. These people owned land, made things, and traded. People who were slaves or did the manual work that society needed to work were at the bottom of the social ladder. Religion ladder. Religion played a big role in city life because there are many temples and shrines in the city that are dedicated to different gods and goddesses. Priests and priestesses led processions, rites, and sacrifices as part of regular religious celebrations and holidays. People came together at temples for religious ceremonies, worship, and guidance. They were the center of community life. Cities were places where people from different cultures could meet and do business. Traders, artists, and tourists from all over the world would come together to trade goods, ideas, and cultural practices. Mesopotamian cities were hubs of diverse cultures, languages, and customs, where people from all walks of life coexisted and collaborated. They worked together to reach social, cultural, and economic goals. The beautiful buildings and busy cities of Mesopotamia give us a taste of the lively and active. Communities that thrived there, ancient goals. Thither. Ancient Mesopotamian culture was based on cities with ziggurats, temples, palaces, busy markets, crowded streets, and a lot of socializing. There. Ancient socializing. The more we learn about the history of the Mesopotamian city-states, the more we understand how hard it was to live in a city and how old buildings still affect us today. The socializing. Today. The city-states of ancient Mesopotamia were very advanced. They had complicated social and political systems, were centers of trade, and had beautiful buildings. In today. The buildings. In these cities, a hierarchical social structure governed daily life, with the ruling elites wielding political power through a combination of administrative control and supernatural authority. Buildings. In authority. This part will talk about how Mesopotamian city-states were set up socially and politically, as well as the power, authority, and social hierarchy that shaped life in cities before history began. Authority began. Wealth, job, and family history made up the social hierarchy in Mesopotamian city-states. Based on these things, people were given different social roles and places. The king, powerful priests, and noble families were at the top of the social order. These began. Order. These people had rights, such as the right to own property, go to school, and vote. These rights gave them control over society's institutions and resources. The order. These resources. The free people, who were skilled workers, merchants, landowners, and skilled workers, were below the ruling class. Resources. The class. Free citizens had many rights and responsibilities, such as the right to own property, trade, and hold positions of power. But their power and status in the community were often based on their wealth, education, and social connections. People who were enslaved or worked as manual laborers to keep civilization going were at the bottom of the social order. During most of the time, enslaved people were either prisoners of war who had been freed or dead enslaved people. They didn't have many legal rights or protections. Class. Protections. People who worked for free in fields, workshops, or building sites in exchange for food or money were called laborers. Protections. Laborers. The ruling class in Mesopotamian city-states had too much political power and acted like both gods and administrators. The king, also, known as the NCY, was the most powerful person and was thought to be a descendant of the gods. Laborers. Gods. In most cases, kingship was passed down from father to son through family lines. But there were also times when people took over and put commoners in charge. Gods. Charge. The king had the support of a council of elders made up of powerful people in society, priests, and high-ranking officials. Charge. Officials. The council was an advisory body that gave the king advice on diplomacy, law, and government. Officials. Government. The king also depended on a group of soldiers, tax collectors, administrators, and the council to keep the city-states safe and in order. The Mesopotamian city-states were very well organized politically, mostly because of religion. The king was both a political and religious leader. People considered the monarch to be the god's messenger on earth, responsible for keeping the universe in balance and making sure the kingdom was rich and healthy. Temples and other religious buildings were important places where people prayed, performed rituals, and made sacrifices. They were also places where people got interpretations and explanations of the divine will. Because of this, they were very important in making the king's power legitimate. The ruling class had too much power and influence over the city-states of Mesopotamia. Appointed officials who worked for the king and were in charge of running the government, including managing resources, giving out land, and collecting taxes. These officials were often chosen from the noble families to be responsible for the king's land. They were responsible for making sure that society ran smoothly and that people got the services they needed. The ruling class was also in charge of the law and order. They made decisions about cases, punished criminals, and kept the city-state government in order. Judges and magistrates who ran courts of law heard cases and made decisions based on what was fair, equal, and the law. Punishments could be anything from fines and restitution to prison, mutilation, or death, depending on how bad the crime was and how bad the person was. Here was a hierarchy in Mesopotamian civilization, but the city-states helped people feel like they were part of a community and had a shared identity. People all spoke the same language, practiced the same religion, and followed the same cultural traditions, which made them feel like they were part of a group. All year long, festivals, rites, and rituals brought families and communities closer together and gave people a chance to be happy together. Were more than just religious and cultural ties that kept city-states socially stable. Economic connections were also important. Trade networks, specialized labor, and a shared need for things like food, water, and raw materials made it possible for different groups to work together. The work of landowners and farmers helped the city-state's farms grow, which kept the city-state stable and helped it grow. While this was going on, people who worked, sold things, and made things did so grow. So, the social and political systems of Mesopotamian city-states were built on different levels of power, authority, and social status. So, status. A complicated social structure controlled people's daily lives, and the ruling classes used both divine and administrative power to do so. Status. So, the city-states of Mesopotamia were strong and worked together because they had the same religious beliefs, cultural traditions, and economic ties. Even though there were clear differences in the social structure, we can learn a lot about ancient Mesopotamian culture and how its cities still affect us today. The Sumerians, Sumerians, lived in ancient Mesopotamia. Sumerians, Mesopotamia, had a long-lasting impact on human industry. We are still trying to figure out how city-states were set up socially and politically. Mesopotamia, politically. The Sumerians, politically. Sumerians made important advances in building, law, and administration, as well as groundbreaking discoveries in writing and math. They also laid the groundwork for many parts of modern civilization. Sumerians' civilization. This chapter goes into great detail about the Sumerians' amazing accomplishments, such as the legacy they left behind, and how their work changed the course of human history. Civilization. History. The Sumerians were the first to do many things in science and technology. They are often credited with coming up with writing, astrology, and the wheel. Their history. Wheel. Their civilization, which thrived on the rich plains of Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, gave rise to the first cities in the world. These places were where people shared and improved their ideas, new things, and cultural practices. The four. Sumerians changed ancient Mesopotamia forever with their creativity, resourcefulness, and determination. They also laid the groundwork for modern civilization to grow. Looking back on their achievements will show us how the Sumerians' work still affects our world today. The Sumerian intellectual heritage is a tribute to human persistence and inventiveness. Wheel. Their inventiveness, from coming up with complicated math systems that laid the groundwork for modern math, to coming up with writing, which changed how people talked to each other and kept records. This chapter will talk about the amazing things the Sumerians did in the arts, literature, science, and technology. Inventiveness.e will look at the big ziggurats and fancy temples that the gods lived in Sumerian city-states. We'll also talk about the Sumerians' complicated legal and administrative systems that they used to keep their city-states in order and control their society. We will also learn about the Sumerians' rich cultural history, which includes their great literature, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, their beautiful art, and their skilled craftsmanship. We'll also look at the complicated rites and festivals that the Sumerians followed and worshipped, as well as the pantheon of gods and goddesses that influenced their religious beliefs and practices. We look at what the Sumerians did. We'll learn more about how creative, resourceful, and determined they were. The Sumerians did a lot of good things, and their lasting contributions to human knowledge, culture, and technology are a constant reminder of that. They also remind us of what ancient Mesopotamia left behind. The Sumerians' amazing accomplishments have a long-lasting influence on human history, encouraging succeeding generations to aim for higher levels of innovation, exploration, and discovery. Many people think that the Sumerians were the first to build a civilization. They found out a lot of important things in many fields that are still important today. They helped many areas, like math, farming, and technology. This section talks about the important things the Sumerians did in different areas and how their discoveries have changed the world forever. The Sumerians were the first people to do math. They invented hard math and number systems that people still use today. Discovery. One of their biggest accomplishments was creating a base 60 number system based on the sexagesimal system. If you have trouble with fractions, multiplication, or division, the Sumerian number system can help. There were signs that stood for tens, hundreds, and 60 times. This system made it easy to collect numbers, figure out areas and volumes, and measure time and angles. The Sumerians learned how to count and made a lot of progress in geometry and trigonometry. They learned how to make things, measure land, and look at the stars and planets. They were among the first individuals to acquire the skills to calculate the volume of three-dimensional figures, such as pyramids and cylinders, as well as the area of two-dimensional figures, including squares, rectangles, and triangles. researchers can learn more about Mesopotamian scientific achievements and how they connect to present culture by undertaking scientific experiments, producing reproductions of old artifacts and documents, and looking at them. Mesopotamia had many different faiths, cultures, and ways of living. People from all around and with all kinds of faiths were there. The pantheon of Mesopotamian deities, the epic tales of heroes and monsters, and the religious ceremonies and rituals show how different religions and cultures may be. By studying religious writings, works of art, and archaeological artifacts, scholars can learn more about the cosmology, mythology, and religious practices of Mesopotamia. This helps us understand how people thought and felt about the world before there was any history. Even though Mesopotamia was a long time ago, the ideas from that period still shape how we talk about and dispute politics, religion, the economy, and who we are. Scholars can join in on the continuing debates and conversations concerning cultural appropriation, how to conserve cultural assets, and how ancient civilizations have shaped modern culture. Researchers can help us understand the past better and make better choices in the future by studying Mesopotamian history. They can also utilize what they learn to help them think about the issues and opportunities we have right now. We hope you enjoyed this video and learned something from it. Please like it and subscribe to the channel. We also made another video about Saga Snooze. To watch the video now, click it on the screen. Please let us know in the comments below if you want a specific video about a certain time in history or an ancient civilization.